Fears today that the Albanese government is contemplating breaking an election promise after the Prime Minister refused to rule out reports that Labor are considering treasury-recommended changes to negative gearing.
I've seen those reports, and what we do is we value the public service. So from time to time, I'm sure the public service are looking at policy ideas.
Will you rule out changes to negative gearing and property taxes this term or next?
Well, what we're doing is doing the legislation that we have before the Senate. So I talk about what we're doing, not what we're not doing, and what we're doing is trying to get through that legislation.
This hint at a possible tax shake-up prompted a quick response from the coalition. They pointed out how such changes would spell trouble for millions of Australians.
If you remove a tax incentive from investors, it actually discourages new supply into the system. And moreover, it can push rents up because you'll find that people that are using negative gearing, once they have that tax incentive removed, compensate by raising rents. Why on earth the government is considering this again is beyond me.
These are quite remarkable revelations, but quite unsurprising that the Albanese government would be once again looking at tax grabs at a time when they should instead be looking at how to curtail inflation.
Joining me now for more is Sky News contributor Gary Hardgrave. Gary, surely Labor would not go down this disastrous road. It's been tried before and it spells bad news for the housing market, and it's even worse news for renters.
Oh, this is a mob that like to try and tax us into prosperity. And I think we've actually discovered Albo's own personal project 2025, because he's using all the cover of the Treasury Department says this and this is what we're doing. I tell you, there is a real chance because they've got their eye on the intergenerational wealth of the baby boomers. About $4 trillion are going to pass from one generation to another over coming years. Treasury wants a slice of it. They want a piece of that. They will bring in inheritance taxes, death duties. Negative gearing is just the thin edge of the wedge they've got planned. And look, I get it, Rita. Younger people look at it and say, oh, how come mum and dad, grandparents have got a whole lot of money? It's because they've been working for 40 or 50 years. They've accumulated stuff. They've done stuff. But if you take people out of the provision of private rental, if you take people out of the market, the price of rents are just going to go up. So the Greens are trying to create more misery. Albo is just going along with it because he's hapless, hopeless, and has no ideas of his own. And this bloke I think when he was with Joe Biden the other day, it was more than just the warmth of the handshake that passed between the two, because he's adopted all of the sort of bad bits of Biden, that sort of not knowing where he is, what he's saying, not really sure about what's going on, doesn't know how to run the country, word salad, you name it, it's all happening. Rita, this is politics in Australia right now. We have to get government out of our lives, not interfering more in our lives. And the worst thing we can do is to take the private sector out of the rental market, and that is really what the Greens want to do.
When you've got a housing shortage, which we have in this country, why would you discourage investment in housing, which is what these changes would do, whether we're talking about capital gains tax, negative gearing? If you're getting the mum and dad investors out of that market, you're just going to see even less housing than before.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We're all going to be in grey Soviet-style blocks if they have their way, and they want us to be miserable. They want everything institutionalised. They want big government, big corporations, big unions. They don't want small and family businesses. And heavens, we don't want individuals enterprising enough to go and find a bit of extra money. But Rita, the thing about this whole private rental market is it's not the rich that own an investment house. It's the teachers, it's the fireys, it's the coppers who've been on the job long enough to accumulate a little bit of wealth and then back themselves by borrowing against their prospective income. So, and then they make those houses available for rent. But the stupid state governments, Victoria is one of the worst, Queensland's catching up, New South Wales is hopeless. They bring in all these rules and say, if you want to tear down the wall of the house you're renting and put an elephant in the lounge room, you can go ahead and do it. And the owner can't say anything. So they're trying to kill off the private rental sector. It's really, really wrong.
Well, it's certainly working a treat here in Victoria. Land tax has been a huge part of that equation. Land tax rates have gone through the roof. So, yeah, your mum and dad investors are selling up, and that is forcing rents up because the pool of rental properties is diminishing. And we also have got to consider the long-term consequences, the impact on those who use property to build wealth, so they're not a burden on the government in retirement. They're self-funded. Do we really want to be hitting self-funded retirees again? Now, let's move on to Labor's shoddy mining approvals record. They've repeatedly drawn the ire of that sector, but apparently that's still not good enough to satisfy the Greens. Leader Adam Band has now slammed a recent decision by Labor to approve extensions for 3 coal mines in New South Wales. Band has called it a betrayal of everyone who voted for climate action, and also claimed that Labor has made the climate crisis even worse. And Gary, how's this for hysterical? Adam Band said, you can't put the fire out if you're pouring petrol on it. There you go, always sober analysis there from Adam. Is this going to put a strain on the unofficial coalition we have between Labor and the Greens? The Greens seem to be angry a lot of the time these days.
Yeah, but isn't it true that surely Labor is going to put the Greens last on their preferences? So in other words, this so-called unofficial coalition, surely, if the Greens really cared about Australia, they'd be putting, if the Labor Party actually cared about Australia, they'd put the Greens last. Look, they want it reliable. They want all of us reliant on government. They want us all on the government handout, be thankful to government. This is really sinister stuff, and it's not hysterical to talk like this, because if we don't call this stuff out now, these people are slowly but surely saying, oh, look, we care for the environment. That sounds really nice. I mean, I care for the environment too. But at what cost? It's the question they never want to answer. And so we need to use our coal resources. And the projections here in Queensland are that we're going to dig more coal out of the ground. We're going to dig more out, but we can't use it here. We send it to China. We send it off to other places, and so they can use our coal to make stuff, and then they send it back to us and we buy it at full retail rate. We are crazy. We need cheap, reliable baseload, and did I say cheap? I'll say cheap again. In fact, we need really cheap electricity to get our country moving again. Pretty simple.
It is pretty simple, and it's criminal that we've got some of the highest energy costs in the world when we should have the lowest. There should be rock bottom with the natural resources we're blessed with. Now, student debt is an issue. It's soared to over $81 billion due to the rising cost of degrees, indexation. It's added another $3.4 billion to the outstanding loan total last financial year. This means that graduates are taking longer to pay back their student loans, Gary, and tax office data shows that the federal government is already writing off hundreds of millions of dollars in student debt, and it plans to write off another $2.2 billion, and if that's taxpayer money. And I do question what all this debt is for. Of course, they're very useful degrees to be studied, but we have so many junk degrees that really don't qualify the graduate for anything. They cost the taxpayers a fortune, and they sell false hope to the student as well.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways, some of these degrees become remedial therapy for people who are just bored in life, because they know after they finish the degree, they just can ping off overseas and have a gap year, which lasts for 5, and they never pay the debt back. So, look, spare me. I was one of the first people to ever go into the HECS scheme. I studied part-time from 1987 onwards. So I was one of the first people to ever pay HECS. And yes, I was working part-time. I was working, and so I was studying part-time. So I paid my debt off, I think, 3 or 4% of my income. In fact, I think I overpaid it. They had to send me a refund at one stage. You know, little steps along the way. If you pay it off gradually, it's good. I know others who say, you know what, what's the debt for this year going to be? Well, I'm going to work my tail off over Christmas. I'm going to come up with the money up front. I get a discount for paying the HECS, the contribution to the overall cost of education early. So what about those people? People who actually have paid their debt off, people who saved up the money, paid the stuff up front. You know, they really should be even more angry than you and I as taxpayers are. $81 billion of people who are basically bludging off the rest of us. Get on with the business of earning money out of the degree. If your degree was worth anything, you should be earning more than the average. Go and get that money and pay your debt off. Pay it off faster than you're required. I just, for the life of me, don't understand it. It's lousy, but I really worry that Labor and the Greens, that unofficial coalition you talk about, will want to do a Joe Biden and will want to pay and forgive those debts.
Yep.
And that's going to cost all of us. Older people are living in misery, paying more for power, and we're going to give these people who've shirked their responsibility to pay off their debt a free pass. That is just wrong, but typical of Labor, typical of Labor.
Well, you need to be earning just over $54,000 per annum to start making any sort of payments on HECS. So some of
But
the
you can pay it earlier.
graduates, if they're working...
You can earn money
Oh,
less
of
than
course,
that and
you
still
can.
start paying, you know. I don't get it.
Oh, you can always opt to pay it earlier, but the
Exactly.
compulsory payment where they deduct it from your salary starts off at just over $54,000. So if you're working part-time or if you're working casually, you can avoid paying it if you don't want to engage in full-time work. Now, before you go, this is another bombshell story from Victoria, with the builders of the North East Link, the most expensive road in Victorian history. There's allegations they've been coerced by the CFMEU into hiring casual workers earning $300,000 per annum to operate gantry cranes on the project instead of using full-time employees who a special North East Link pay deal would have covered. Is it any wonder, Gary, that this state is broke, the biggest state debt in the country, and we've got projects running late, running over budget? This particular road, North East Link, it started off costing $15.8 billion, which I would have thought was plenty already. It's already blown up to $26 billion, and God, who knows where it'll end up.
Well, they've institutionalised the same kind of approach in Queensland, for instance. So Victoria's debt is bad. Queensland's debt's just as bad. Per capita, they say, probably worse. But nevertheless, they've institutionalised it. 30 to 40% additional costs associated with building stuff in Queensland. And so people are building stuff in Victoria and New South Wales in particular because it's actually, you're going to get bang for your buck. But they are now, the CFMEU are now saying to private companies, if you don't hire a union person, if you don't follow our rules and pay at the 30 to 40% above the rack rate, we won't allow you to get any work here. So companies are making decisions. They're going elsewhere. They're going to South Australia, to Western Australia. They're just getting the heck out. And some are not even bidding for jobs. We've got 60,000 house sites sitting there waiting for someone to start building on in southeast Queensland. That's the figure today that I was given, 60,000, but they can't find anybody to build it because all of these added on costs. So Victoria is the place to flee. It really is. That's what the number plate should read. Victoria, the place to flee. I just hope the Lions win on Saturday. That's all I care about now, Rita.
Are you coming down for it, Gary?
Only in my heart and my mind. I will be spiritually there, Rita.
Spiritually. You know what? People think it's going to be easy to get a grand final ticket because it's Sydney-Brisbane. It's not. It's going to be just as hard as any other grand final. But I'm with you. I'm all in on Brisbane, especially after the hell they dragged Chris Fagan through for the last couple of years. I really hope he comes out as the premiership coach. Gary Hardgrave, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Cheers, Rita.